All right, you guys, welcome to another episode of the Strain Forward podcast. This is episode 6. Today's guest, I'm very excited about. His name is Michael Kummer. He's Austrian, correct?
Right.
He's Austrian. He is, so I know him from the gym. You're a dude that I know you as, this is going to sound ridiculous. When you take your shirt off, it was like, hold on a second. This guy's like in really good shape, like impressively good shape. And so today, for you guys out there watching or listening, we're going to dive into his health, fitness, nutrition background. He's incredibly smart. He's got his own supplement line. He does a lot of really great things. He does some homesteading, like all of it. And so the goal is to provide you all with a ton of value. Without further ado, Mr. Kummer, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into health, fitness. Maybe start with early years, Austrian sprint champion, like the whole thing. I want to hear it all.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And funny enough, when you said that, when I saw you work out, I'm like, holy shit, this guy's fit.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank
you. And yeah, so born and raised in Austria. At some point during in high school, I got into track. And I think actually my PE teacher told me, you guys should try out track. My buddy and I we started, together, and then we, made it all the way to the European, championships back in the days. And it was really one of the, I think, most impactful times of my life, because I learned that just because I feel something doesn't necessarily mean it indicates my physical limit to something,
I want you to expound on that. That's a really good point.
Specifically, when you start working out, whatever it is, or doing any sort of physical activity, you at some point you reach a limit where you think like you can't do it anymore. There is nothing more you can do, and it turns out there is. It's just your mind, putting up like a limit of be careful because you might get hurt if you continue, but that's not your real limit. And I discovered that the coach, my track coach at the time, he trained with the Russians.
I'm sure that was a lot for Russians.
He was pretty tough. The first couple of trainings, he wouldn't even talk to us, critique us, nothing. He would just he told us later that we're gonna flunk out anyway, so it's not even worth his time telling us anything. And he was pretty hardcore. He was in his opinion like you don't have to if you want to lie down and do that that's fine, but you're never gonna make it. That's kind of his thing.
Wow.
And that really, not everyone can handle this, I think, but it kind of stuck with me. And there was one specific workout. It was in the winter. It was snow outside on the track. There was only one lane kind of free where we could run. And we were doing intervals, like 200 meters or whatever. And I would throw up and would just lie there. And usually in the past, my training was done at that point. I would throw up and I was done. I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I went to my physical limit. And one day he said, well, we're going to go inside now, and you can choose to stay there or you continue to work out. And I got up, I threw up, I got up, and I continued to work out. I'm like, I can actually do it. This is just, obviously there was some, you don't want to do this every day.
Right.
But there is this learning curve where, once you've, crossed that threshold, you can then perform at a much higher level.
Dude, I'm so glad you're hitting on that, man. That is so huge. And to this day, I think the only workouts I've ever thrown up from were track workouts. 100%. I was telling someone today, a client, I think they're the most underutilized tools after a certain age for fitness. And you're right. Once you experience like that moment where I don't think I can keep going, and then you get up and you keep going anyway, or someone's like, hey, come on, just do it with me, even if it's your bros. And then you do it and you're like, oh my gosh, like I have a lot more in the tank than I thought. I think it's so awesome you're hitting on that.
Yeah. And that started my interest in fitness. But then I moved to the US and adopted the American way of life, most of the bad things, including the standard American diet, unfortunately. And and I stopped working out. I would go for a run every so often, or go to the gym, to like LA Fitness or whatever, and curl a little bit, or but nothing really serious. And I realized over time, my body was changing. It wasn't, when I was young and I could eat whatever. Even when I was a pro athlete, I didn't really pay attention to any of the things that I pay more attention to now than working out, sleep, diet, stress management, environmental toxins, hormetic stressors, all of the things that I pay very close attention to now, I did not at the time. And sometimes I kind of wish, like, I knew what I know now, because I think I would have performed better.
Yeah.
Even despite my youth mitigating many of those, stupid decisions that I made at the time. And but moved to the US, adopted an American diet, and my gut health, took a nosedive. I've always had, until that point, gut issues. Ran in the family, I thought, there's nothing I can do. And then at some point, I ran into a couple during a childbirth preparation class. And that guy, they were friendly, they were Latinos. My wife's Costa Rican, so we kind of connected on that, level. And we started hanging out, and we noticed this guy's eating differently. He doesn't eat any grains, and no dairy, no legumes. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm on a paleo diet." And I'm like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Well, it's kind of trying to mimic, how our ancestors, ate, or at least those people, depending on how far back you think, humans go.
Sure.
That's kind of how they ate, and that's what I'm mimicking because it's healthier for me."
Yeah.
I'm like, whatever,
Yeah.
You do you, and
How about keep doing this?
Exactly. I just, keep rocking. And then at some point, my wife and I actually watched a documentary about the amount of added sugars the average American consumes annually. It was like, bags of sugar. I mean, it's ridiculous. And my wife was diagnosed with pre-diabetes at the time and had headaches all the time. And, and with my gut issues and my, physique kind of looking the way it did. We got to do something, we're going to cut out all added sugars. And so we did that and immediately felt better, both of us.
Really?
And then I, went back to my buddy and said, "Hey, tell me more about this paleo diet. I'm interested." And so he kind of explained the concept. I'm like, "You know what? I'm going to do this too." So I went back to my wife and said, "Starting tomorrow, I'm going to do paleo." And she's like, "I'm the one cooking. What do you mean you're doing paleo? I'm not cooking for you, separately, And so we got into a huge argument. And I'm at the time at least, and I still am to a degree, a fairly black and white kind of guy. If I set my mind to something, I bulldoze over everything in my way. And that really that was a significant discussion we had at the time. I remember that. And I'm like, you know what? Whatever, I don't do paleo. We just all die painfully, sooner than we should.
Yeah.
Kind of, played that card with my wife, and she started investigating, and she said, "You know what? I think that paleo is a good thing. We should do paleo." I'm like, "Right on.
Let's do it." That's great.
Let's do paleo." So we did paleo, and seriously, from one week to another, oh my God, dishes were gone.
Really?
But paleo at the time for us was a piece of steak and maybe grilled zucchini. That was our idea of eating paleo. Yeah. And then over the years, there are now everything can be paleo. You can eat sweet potatoes and maple syrup all day, and it's paleo. But it doesn't really mimic how humans should be eating, right? Just because the food is paleo friendly or paleo compatible. And so we got more into paleo baking and paleo this and paleo that. And, at some point then I discovered keto. I went to a conference. I'm like, keto, that's really where it's at. It's not just paleo. You got to do keto, if you really want to be, as healthy as can be. And so I went back to my wife again and said, "You know what? Paleo is not cutting it. We have to do keto."
Same response.
Same response, exactly. Like, you gotta be kidding! I already cut out rice and beans and all the stuff that I grew up on, and now you want to cut out all carbs? Yeah. And I'm like, "Yeah, trust me, we have to do this." And got into an argument again, and I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, we're not gonna do it." And then she did her own research, and said, "You know what? I think we're eating too many carbs. We need to be more metabolically flexible, and we need to be able to burn fat for energy, right? Not just glucose or carbs." And so we did that. And the thing is with keto, that was already at the time where keto was fairly popular, and everything can be keto. There is keto bread, there is keto, with crap ingredients, seed oils, what have you. But it's, it hits the macro, so it's keto.
Right.
And so it took us a while to realize that that version of keto doesn't really work for us. So we kind of backshift a little bit to a ketogenic paleolithic diet, like at the combination of both ingredient quality and lowerish carb kind of thing.
Right.
And it worked for us, but we also consumed a lot of things that we don't no longer do, like almond flour or nuts in general. Yeah. And I realized my gut issues were returning, And then I ran into Paul Saladino in Costa Rica, and he told me about carnivore, and then a little bit later then his animal-based approach. And I went back to my wife and said, "No, but I did it differently." And I said, "You know what? I learned something. I would like to try it out. We don't have to switch. I would just, I want to do it for 30 days. Yeah, let's just try it." I said I want to do carnivore, and so I switched, to carnivore, and again, the gut issues went away. I felt, really good, but I also realized that this is probably not going to fly with Kathy, eating meat only, And I realized, there is more to food than just, the nutritional, the fuel aspect. It's a social thing. It, brings people together. It, you might have social, certain emotional connections to certain foods, like the ones that I grew up with, and just cutting all of that out, you know, might backfire, or it might not be as effective as you want it to be if there is then, if you're missing something from an emotional, social, cultural perspective.
Yeah.
And so we kind of agreed on an animal-based approach, and even later, most recently, in the last, year or two or so, we actually discovered we learned a lot from Dr. Bill Chandler about not only what you eat but how you eat it. Humans have learned how to process certain foods to mitigate, plant toxins. Fermenting, sprouting, soaking, heating, grinding. All of those things that we are doing to food, that makes it not ideal but more compatible or less problematic. And depending on your state of health, your level of activity, and numerous other factors, I think that you can get away with eating certain foods during certain times of the year, without suffering any, negative consequences. And so that's kind of the approach we settled on, and that's been, as a framework, working for us very, very well. It's predominantly animal based, but there are certain things that I would not necessarily recommend for someone who's metabolically unhealthy or who is insulin resistant and stuff to consume. But if you're in, like you and I, there's probably nothing wrong. Even, I personally would never, well, I don't want to say never, but I don't see myself eating spinach, for example. But if you eat it once a year during that time when it grows, and then not for the rest of the year, those oxalates in there are probably not going to harm you.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's a lot of context and nuance that's missing in a lot of conversations about nutrition.
Yeah.
Where it's, you either do this or you're an idiot.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, I want to ask you this question. So, what are your thoughts on, because there's a huge debate around, not eating vegetables, eating vegetables, like there's specific ones, especially because of the oxalates. And there's a school of thought that's, like you just said, black or white. Don't do it, or if you do it, you're going to fail, and I think you're just going to die. But then there's the other school of thought that there's a hermetic response you get from consuming those oxalates that can be very similar to that of a sauna, an ice bath, where if you do any of those things for too long, it's dangerous, but the little bit you do gives you a benefit. So I'm interested to hear what's your take on that?
I believe that to be true. I think there is a case to be made for exposing yourself to certain toxins or whatever in limited amounts to allow your body to respond and handle them better. Knowing that if you consume spinach every day, you're probably going to end up with, kidney stones and joint pain and whatever, all of the things that come from, oxalate exposure.
Yeah.
But doing it once every so often, I think it's perfectly fine, much like it is. There might be differences in terms of how beneficial are certain hormetic stressors. Like I would argue, jumping into the cold plunge every day has probably more benefits than eating spinach every day. But within the context of, a little bit can make you stronger, I do believe that to be true.
Yeah, no, that's a really good thought. So then off the top of your head, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but can you list out like what would be some vegetables that you would say, hey, these are a no-go or like a once a year thing, and these are vegetables that I would 100% consume often?
Yeah, I think that seasonal fruits are probably less problematic for most people because, those are the parts of the plant that want to be eaten, right? An apple tree wants you to eat the apples and then poop the seeds, so, you can get another apple tree.
Yeah.
On the other hand, eating the most vital parts of the plant, the seeds, the stems, the leaves, the skin in many cases, is probably not so ideal. So I would say, for example, taking something that I grew up with is potatoes, right? The most protective part of the plant is the skin because that separates, the environment from the potato, right? Eating the skin that has the most defense chemicals is probably a very bad idea, and there's really no reason why you should.
Yeah.
But if you, peel the potato, if you maybe soak it overnight and discard the water, then if you even ferment it in a saline solution, to kind of get the starch content down. So when you then, fry it with oil, you don't get those carcinogens that would normally form when you combine starches with high heat, and fat. then it's a whole different, animal.
Yeah, right.
And so I would say sweet seasonal fruits, cucumbers and squashes, if you remove the peel and or the skin and remove the seeds, those are perfectly fine. Avocados are fruits, olives are fruits. Nightshades is something that a lot of people respond negatively to.
Yeah.
But even there, with tomatoes, if you remove the seeds, and if you really want to go through the hassle of removing the skin, the flesh itself is probably significantly less problematic. I personally stay away from leafy greens.
Really?
I don't really love them anyway, so
Yeah.
it's not really a hard thing for me to cut out.
Yeah.
But oxalates are one of the things that I don't know any way of mitigating. There is no cooking, fermenting, sprouting
Right.
to get rid of the oxalates. So I typically, stay away from those and stay away from most seeds, nuts and seeds, because I know I don't do well with those. And those are, again, the most protected parts of the plant that you don't want to consume. And but having a handful of nuts every so often is fine. If I go somewhere there is a cheese board and there's a couple of almonds, whatever, I pop some.
Yeah.
They're not going to do anything to me, but I would not, eat like a bag of almonds every day.
Right. Right. Now, okay, so tell me this. So this is a good segue into you do homesteading.
Yeah.
Currently. Do you get all of your nutrition from what you grow and have at your home, or do you sometimes go to the store for whatever?
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, not yet. I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But we just, and I like this property here. We just have an acre and a quarter.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
But we did buy 45 acres last year up in Manlow, which is about 2 hours away from here, where we can then take it to the next step and raise at least all of the protein we consume.
Right.
So right now we have chickens for meat and eggs. We have geese. We have bees for honey. We have a vegetable garden, but to be perfectly honest, I think our goal midterm is to grow all of the protein, all of the animal foods that we consume. And since we don't eat that many plants anyway, we're okay buying, because if there is something, I don't know, another lockdown emergency, whatever, the Russians invade, whatever the case might be, if we cannot get any veggies, we'll be fine. That's the one thing we don't need. Now, we'd like to have some, but we don't need them. And so,
as long as you have the essentials,
Yeah.
especially in that situation, that's really all that matters. Okay, so that's another great question. Was your motivation for homesteading more health or conspiracy, or was it a combination of both?
Combination of both. I mean, conspiracy, we have seen, the last couple of years that things happen that I never thought would.
Oh, yeah.
And even to that extent where you cannot find eggs in the store anymore or whatever, it's not too far-fetched to say there might be, again, a point in time where it's going to be difficult, more expensive, or in other ways prohibitive to buy the quality food that, you want.
100%, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you heard this, but they being the entities at B, were monitoring buying seeds or I think they're referred to as heirloom seeds, where they regrow every year. So you could buy these genetically modified seeds. You couldn't find any other version that would give you one season of produce, and that's it. Not the way nature actually intended it.
I mean, that's exactly, if you buy, Monsanto, seeds, then you have to buy them every year. And the thing is, there have been cases where farmers have been fined for saving. Seed saving is something that farmers have always been doing. They keep the best seeds so they can grow them, plant next year again. And Monsanto is going to fine you if you do that. Or there have even been some cases where I guess the wind or whatever, brought over some of those seeds to the neighboring property, and then they got fined, even though they never purchased from Monsanto. They don't even want that crap, And so I mean, it is the Wild West out there, and I don't think it's going to get any better. And so that was one consideration, but the quality of food was probably even the stronger argument, because we've realized as part of the growing and raising livestock that even the best grown food that you can buy is not good enough for what I would like to consume. And just to give you one example, anytime there is the USDA involved, and with most food production there is, and you have to get, if you want to, grow chickens and sell them to the public, right? And so you are in a USDA inspected kind of facility. That chicken is being bathed in chlorine before it's packaged.
Yeah.
It's not only bathed in, it's swimming in chlorine, for a while. And the type of chicken that is raised, the Cornish cross, is a genetic freak that has so many health issues, that grows from birth to butcher in like 45 days, to eating fat, obese babies that can't even walk anymore because their breasts are so big that they cannot, their legs are not strong enough to sustain their body weight. They cannot reproduce. They're a dead end from that perspective. And those are 99% of the chickens that you buy in the store. And I'm like, I don't want to have, either of that. And then they are fed a feed that increases the omega-6 ratio in their body fat, because all monogastric animals, they are what they eat, much like humans. And if you eat crap food, you see it in your own health and in your fat tissue, etc. And so we couldn't find any chicken that is not Cornish cross and that is raised on a low PUFA, low polyunsaturated fatty acid diet, meaning no corn, no soy, no vegetable oil binders to bind the minerals to the seeds, etc. Didn't exist until recently. And so we said, we got to do it ourselves. And, we concluded that it cost us approximately $30 to $35 to raise one chicken that way. If I was in the chicken business, I would have to sell a chicken for $50, to make profit. Nobody's going to buy them,
Right.
So if I buy the chicken for $10 in the store or whatever it costs, I don't even know. You know what type of chicken it is, and that's not something I want to eat. And the same goes with, we buy until, now an entire cow each year from a local farm here, but it's processed or butchered in a USDA facility. So we cannot get, certain organs because it's not allowed according to USDA rules.
Really?
So we cannot even eat nose to tail if we wanted to, and the list goes on and on. I mean, raw milk and, labored for pet food, the one we buy, because it cannot be, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it begs the question why they would be monitoring it like that and keeping you from being able to eat nose to tail and all the things. And that's where you can definitely go down the path of all the conspiracies and whatever.
You can think what you want.
It's 100% financial, I would say. Like, that's definitely one motivation. The other motivations, maybe that's another podcast, but it's really unfortunate. And actually, I did not know that about all chickens in the superstores. Like, even like a good one, like a organic, if it says organic, whatever.
It just means that the chicken had organic feed, but it can be organic, high PUFA feed. It doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, so there's like scapegoats. They can kind of get around the terms, and they're definitely.
Yeah, they make it like, the best thing that I've ever seen is you see it on egg cartons all the time from vegetarian fat hens. They are announcing on the label that they're feeding the chicken a wrong diet. Chickens are not herbivores. Right. They're not plant eaters. They are insectivores. They are. I would argue they are meat-leaning omnivores. Because if we see, if we give them, if we throw out, if we butcher a rabbit or whatever, and we throw out the carcass, they go nuts over that.
Really?
You give them some grains next to it, they wouldn't even look at it. They go for the animal protein any time of the day. And that tells you, and they've not been influenced by, ads and TV and our government.
Yeah.
They just eat what's natural and what they think is best for them. And that is animal protein,
That's so crazy. Yeah. So, okay. So let me ask you this. So as far as homesteading goes, do you eat your own chicken? Correct. How many chickens do you go through? Do you purchase? Like, what does that look like? Do you always have like 10 on deck that you're kind of rolling?
No. We butcher once or twice a year. So the last batch we had 30, and that lasts us for a little bit of a half. We don't eat chicken every day. We do maybe once a week or so, and so that's typically what we do. We raise them in batches. We butcher them in batches.
I see. So you'll buy a bunch of them. You'll butcher them. You'll freeze the meat.
Correct.
And then pull from there. And then you have other chickens on your property that lay eggs.
Correct. Keep those. Yeah, exactly. So there are different breeds because our egg layers, and occasionally you have to butcher one for whatever reason, and there is no meat on them. I mean, and that's the other nuance. Humans have not been raising chickens for meat until very recently. I'm talking a few decades ago. In the past, you would eat chicken in a soup or in a stew. If once the laying hen stopped laying, it was basically turned into a stew or a stock or what have you.
Yeah.
But on a egg laying chicken, on a heritage breed, there is no meat on that bird. There's no, it's not worth it raising that chicken for meat. And so, and then it's not as nutritious as the meat of a ruminant animal. So the whole thing of, they say, this, back in the days, it was like almost like something special when you had chicken dinner.
Really?
Because chicken was so expensive, and it was not something that, now it's the cheapest meat you can buy almost.
Yeah, how many cars go through the Chick-fil-A line per day at every single store? It's insane. I've also heard not good things about the Chick-fil-A chicken and what's going on there. That's crazy.
None of the chicken. If you see how, just drive up north a little bit, look at it. You cannot look at them because they're all fenced off and they're going to probably shoot you if you get close by, because you would see how the conditions, those chicken houses, absolutely awful. Absolutely awful.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that Chick-fil-A is so good, because I'm guilty of it. It's fantastic, but when you really you boil it down and you look at what's going on, it's really convicting. Yeah. You're like, why am I consuming this in my body right now? Yeah. Man. All right, so tell me this. So you're homesteading, you got your kids into it, the whole thing. What has that been like as far as the family dynamic goes? Have they enjoyed it? Has it been fun? Are your kids into it? Like the whole thing?
I think we had a little bit of everything. We are enjoying it, all of us. The kids have learned a lot, specifically when it comes to, the circle of life, because there's death all the time, either because we butcher or because a hawk, comes down and kills one of the birds, or someone gets sick, whatever the case might be. There is new life and there is death. And that has been not only for the kids, but also for us, because, I grew up in the city, I never raised anything. And so that's been a very profound experience for all of us. And then just a learning curve of understanding, okay, how does, food doesn't come from the store, this is where it comes from. This is what you need to do to turn it into food. You need to raise that animal, love it for, all days except one, and then, that animal has a bad life.
All days except one.
Yeah.
The big day.
And that's also something, that a lot of people don't understand. How can you love an animal and then kill it? How can you not? We've learned. it's one of the, most of our animals have names, even the ones that we know have a very, limited lifespan, but at least while they live, they have the best life ever, or the best we can give them. And then it's a bad day, but we're all going to have that bad day at one point,
That's a very profound point there. Yeah, I've thought about that too, and it's actually something that this again goes into the whole politics and whatever your opinions on it, but like people who I think are against killing an animal for food, like they don't understand. Like that's literally how it happens. You go to the store. We're so detached from it. You go to the store and you buy a package of burger meat. It's like, how do you think that got there? And it's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I take issue with people who eat animals but don't want to know anything about where the food comes from. That's just, for me, incredibly stupid, But I even a bigger issue with those people who think that by not buying or by saying if you eat an animal, you are bad, and if you eat only plants, then you don't harm animals. Because those people in particular have never had a vegetable garden, have never had to pick off hornworms of the tomato plant and kill those, because otherwise they would be eating your tomatoes and you would not have any harvest. And that's just in our local garden here, where we can do those things by hand. There is no collateral damage. If we see an insect on our plants, we can pick it off and feed it to the chickens. Yeah. But we killed an animal at that point. An insect, but nonetheless an animal. Now think about that on a larger scale, where machines come in and till and seed and harvest. It's not only insects that get killed, it's rodents. Mammals get killed, by harvesting or by producing plants for us to eat, and so saying that, I'm a vegan and, my food doesn't kill any animals, it's bullshit, that at least the animals that I kill, I eat, or our chickens eat, and then I eat the chicken, but there is no collateral damage in the sense of, I kill a bunch of deer, that just happen to be in the field while I, mowed over it. And
it's just that detachment.
Yeah.
It's that just not understanding the actual process behind all of it.
Yeah.
And making that knee-jerk reaction and trying to, play the hero or whatever it is you want to do. I love that topic, and I would love to talk more about that at some point. Diving into exercise.
Yeah.
So, because this is the question I really want your opinion on. I'm curious your thoughts. So, maybe not exercise, but just health in general. Mm-hmm. If you were to tell someone who came to you and said, "Hey, what are like the 5 main things I need to focus on to be the healthiest version of myself?" What would you say? How would you define that? I'm very curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are like 8 or so that I typically refer to. I think sleep is very foundational. I mean, you could argue what is the most important. I think that the core ones are probably all important, but sleep definitely. If you don't sleep well, don't bother. Don't cut your sleep short to go to the gym. Stuff like that. So sleep number 1. Diet, exercise, obviously, stress management, the avoidance of environmental toxins, which is another big thing that was fairly new to us. Like, every time you put something on your skin, or, deodorant, any type of skincare product, tap water, if it's not filled, plastic water bottle. I mean, there are so many things that expose you to environmental toxins that can derail your health, prevent you from losing weight or weight gain or causing infertility and a number of other things. So that is one thing. Reconnecting with nature. I think that's something that we all neglect. Just walk barefoot. Take your shirt off.
Yeah, I'm huge on barefoot and shirtless. I love it.
Yeah. Be hot, be cold. Expose yourself to hormetic stressors. I would probably start with hot and cold, and not necessarily pick spinach as my exposure point first, but all of the things that make us uncomfortable, I think you should expose yourself to on a regular basis. Community is another big thing. I've noticed that we have that luxury where we can try it ourselves without a community. Back in the days, if you had only one butcher in your village, you had to play nice with that guy because that's where your food came from. Now we don't need that anymore. We can do it. Everyone can be an idiot. We don't have to talk to anyone because we can figure it out. Online or ordering or whatever the case might be. There's always another solution if we don't like that interaction point. But the truth is that we are not meant to be alone. We are meant to be in a community. Any sort of spirituality. I mean, I'm not religious, but I think there is a lot in religion, in spirituality, that helps you stay sane, in particular in times like we have today. So I think that's something you really need to work on, and stress management. I mean, many of those things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, they all. Yeah.
But being able to not only manage your stress, but also have tools at your disposal to down-regulate when you need to, be it breathing, be it cold water immersion, be it exercise, whatever, anything to kind of get you out of the fight or flight mode, and be more zen.
Yeah. So I think I know the answer to this, but I kind of want to go through the list. What's your go-to form of training? Is it CrossFit? Like, do you go to the gym and you follow the prescribed workouts, or do you do some other stuff?
Yeah, no, I mean, I used, until maybe 2 or so years ago, it was CrossFit 5-6 times a week. I think my main form of exercise right now is walking, as mundane as it may sound.
Walking's incredible. I just made a post about it. I think walking's incredible.
Yeah, it's very low impact. There's usually nothing that hurts when you just walk, for a while. If I cover, let's say 5 miles or 5 kilometers, what have you, I burn the same calories if I were to run, even though it's going to take me longer, but it's low impact. It's not something that I've yet to find someone who's, today I really don't want to walk.
Yeah.
Because it's so, I mean, you can think you do, theoretically, you can do whatever while you walk, and it's not going to bother you. And so that's one thing. But I also, I've taken up mobility more seriously now again. As I'm turning 43, and I've noticed that I'm getting stiffer, so that's one thing. But I'm also starting to, show more interest in other things, and maybe taking up sprinting again, like back in the days. Swimming, martial arts, just different movement patterns that I'm not used to, that I might not be good at, but I think that are very beneficial to kind of, allow me to continue to move pain-free and don't look like a robot,
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so are you a fan I didn't hear you mention lifting weights,
Mhm.
but I know you do. I've seen you lift.
Yeah,
weights.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Are you a fan of lifting
Yes.
weights? Do you do it often? Do you not do it often?
I typically go CrossFit twice a week now.
Okay, so that's your
usually what I do.
weightlifting.
Mhm.
Yeah, and because I think this is important. There's a difference, and you can attest to this probably. I'm 31, you're 43, right? And so there's that 12-year gap, and so I'm still in a phase where I am lifting pretty heavy, pretty often. Have you found that now that you're 43, if you lift too heavy too often, you beat your body up too much, or are you able still to recover from it? You just don't quite enjoy it as much.
No, I absolutely love lifting.
Yeah.
And I still enjoy lifting heavy, especially the core exercise, deadlifts, squatting, those kind of things. I got a little bit more cautious, like with snatches and dynamic movements, where I'm like, it doesn't really benefit me to be able to snatch a certain, weight.
Right.
But I want to be able, to deadlift. I want to be able to squat. I want to have, the core kind of, I want to be solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't need to learn. I don't need to fine tune, my snatching skills so I can snatch 300 pounds.
Yeah.
That's I'm like that train has left the station. There's nothing for me to win anymore. In that regard, I'd leave that to younger folk. But everything else I do enjoy very much. And I think lifting is important. I mean, if you don't put load on your structure, stuff is gonna get weaker. Your joints, your ligaments, your muscles, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I want to obviously keep that up and combine it with explosive type of movements. And then some of the very low impact stuff like walking, swimming, etc. Kind of get not a little bit of everything, but I want to be. I guess I don't want to suck completely at anything.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I made a post about that today too. Your fitness in that regard can be really simple. If you focus on your main lift, squat, bench, deadlift, you do some accessory work for your lower body and upper body. You pick a movement, whatever it is. And I mentioned sprinting maybe 1 or 2 times a week. You walk. If you just do that the rest of your life, you'll be incredibly fit. You'll be in great shape.
Yeah.
So I love that you're saying that. I'm curious about this. So how do you mentioned sleep. I 100% agree. Sleep is so important. How do you optimize? Do you have anything specific you do to optimize your sleep? Because I know some people have like these crazy routines and they do all this stuff. Like, what do you do to optimize your sleep? You just get to bed on time and then just make sure you sleep.
I mean, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, I've tried, also a number of, different supplements, different routines, different, gadgets, what have you. But whenever I get too much into, like gadgetry, I kind of try to remember, humans have been doing this, have been sleeping well, I would argue, for a very long time without any.
Yeah, you don't have to overcomplicate it.
You don't have to overcomplicate it. On the other hand, I do realize that the environment we live in today is very much different from maybe hundreds, however long ago, there 5,000 years ago, and I'm like, there is probably a need because we cannot live how humans used to, or most of us can't or don't want to. I don't want to live, alone or in a tribal community somewhere in the forest, with a loincloth, I kind of like the modern life, but it comes with a lot of things that make it more difficult to sleep well, and make it more, modern life in many ways gets in the way of doing things right, or of making it easy to do things right. It's always or very often an uphill battle to do the right thing, to eat right, to sleep well. You always need to make an effort.
Because the wrong thing is so easily accessible.
Exactly.
Fast food is a perfect example.
Exactly. But to get back to the question, what I try is to keep a consistent sleep routine. Meaning I get up roughly at the same time every day. I go to bed roughly at the same time, and I try to follow the sun as much as possible. So I don't go to bed, when there's still light outside, and I don't eat, after dark. Kind of those basic kind of things. And and if I move enough during the day, if I expose myself to sunlight during the day, especially early in the morning, I typically walk the dog early in the morning, so I get if I see the sun come up, I just stand there and stare into the sun where it doesn't hurt it because it's so low for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I really get that, sun exposure. I go out at noon and take off my shirt and just sit there in the grass.
Get some sun, some grounding.
And if I do that, I tend to sleep well, and I don't. I've gotten rid of my Apple Watch.
I don't do any of that stuff anymore.
I got rid of my iPhone for a while until I realized that a dumb phone is really incredibly dumb and nobody can communicate with me because everyone wants to send me an iMessage or a WhatsApp, And I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have to go that extreme, but I leave my phone, in the evening. I don't look at it anymore. It's not in my bedroom. I put it in the office. I try to stay away from obviously stimulants. I don't drink coffee, afternoon. I typically count my caffeine intake at 9 a.m., so and I don't drink alcohol before going to bed, and so all of the basic things that I know can be sleep disruptors, and if I avoid them, I sleep well.
Everything's great. Yeah. Have you experimented with I remember Huberman? Andrew Huberman?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think everyone knows him now. He's great. He talked about L-theanine, I think it's called. Have you
I've tried a couple of those. I actually reviewed the Momentous sleep supplement that I think Huberman was involved in formulating it, or at least he put his name on it so he can charge
make some money off it? Yeah.
money with it. I tried those. I am also a huge fan of Dr. Parsley's sleep remedy. He's an ex-Navy SEAL who.
Okay, yes, I have heard of this guy. He's great. Yes,
he is pretty good. He is he's a delicious tasting tea that has some of those like magnesium and 5-HTP and GABA and even a little bit of melatonin. I think like the mix that he put in there, and I enjoy the taste. I enjoy sitting on the couch, and sipping that tea.
Yeah.
And it does work in terms of making you sleepy and kind of. I think the main thing really is to disconnect your brain a little bit to de-stress, to get you out of this, oh, I have to, or this guy said, or kind of thing, where you just settle down, mentally. And then, I like those products now. I'm not a fan of relying on something all the time. You should be able to just sleep. But at the same time, knowing that maybe our water is not as rich in minerals anymore as, actual water from a spring somewhere in the mountains. The other day, I just looked at if you buy a bottle of San Pellegrino or whatever, one of those mineral waters, and you look at the mineral content, they are rich in minerals, And if you drink tap water, I feel like I'm dehydrated all the time. I need to supplement with electrolytes because there's nothing in that water, and you're leaching out electrolytes. So from that perspective, adding some magnesium, also knowing that we are, exposed to elevated stress levels, there is, instead of once a week a saber-toothed tiger, we are now exposed to what our brain perceives as a saber-toothed tiger every single day, because of social media and what have you. So there is, I think, a case to be made for magnesium and some of those maybe amino acids and stuff to kind of, help and support you. But I also think that, if you eat well and do a lot of things well and manage your stress well, you should be able to sleep.
Yeah, I would agree. All that stuff you mentioned, because I'm a huge fan of all that stuff too, and I think it's really great. But that's like the fruit that's higher up on the tree. That's not like the low hanging fruit. The low hanging fruit is like manage your stress, eat well, exercise during the day, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. Like if you just start there, most likely you're going to be sleeping really great.
Yeah, and unfortunately for most people, they just want to take that, pill and don't worry about anything else.
Anything else.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work like that at all. What's your best stress management go-to strategy? Do you do any breath work, or is it exercise? Like, is it kind of all combined?
I like the walking.
Yeah.
Because it really allows me to be in my head and think through stuff. I like cold plunging, sitting in there, and really that forces you to actively try something, be it breathing or whatever, to get out of the fight or flight mode, because your brain is screaming, you're dying, get out.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good tool to learn how to manage, that response. Just sitting in the sun and the grass, I've noticed that and really paying attention to how, those sun rays feel in your skin. You can almost, feel like you're piercing your skin, and really paying attention to how does the grass feel, what do you hear, what do you smell, what do you, and being there for 20 minutes just in your own head, for me is an incredible way of disconnecting and de-stressing.
Yeah, I mean, just you describing that made me relax. Seriously, that's incredible. You're so right though, and so it's like you're grounding mentally. You're focusing on sights, feelings, all that stuff. But then if you're barefoot in the grass, you're actually grounding, which Are you? I mean, are you a believer in the
Yes.
grounding?
Oh,
I'm a huge proponent of grounding. What we're talking about, if you guys don't know, for the audience, is like literally walking barefoot in the grass.
Mhm.
It's incredible for you. Can you explain briefly, like the science behind it? Do you know how to
Yeah.
explain that? Well, I know it, but I can't explain it super well.
I mean, it's basically, you know, electron exchange happening. There's electricity flowing through your body when you are, you know, on barefoot on the grass. You know, if there is no rubber sole or whatever in between that would, you know, insulate you, there are literally electrons flowing in one foot and coming out the other one, and that has a dramatic impact on some of that, you know, electron exchange in your body. I mean, there are studies now, and in the beginning I thought that that's all woo-woo, you know.
Yeah, a lot of people did. A lot of people did.
But there is actually studies that clearly show that, you know, just by doing that, you know, you reduce your blood pressure, you know, you increase your HRV, your heart rate variability, and a lot of other, you know, biometrics that improve by just being there. And, you know, the reason is because I don't know exactly um, what happens when, you know, that electricity flows through your body, but it impacts the way, you know, electricity works in your body, you know, because every cell communicates by exchanging electrons, right? And you can positively or negatively, you know, influence that. And so grounding is one way of positively, and I would argue that probably goes back to, you know, to human history. You know, that's something we've been doing unintentionally for a very long time, and so there's probably going to be there was probably some adaptation along the way that has, you know,
someone invented the shoe or whatever, and then it just it went from there. Yeah. So, and I remember I read the study on grounding. The research study said that 40 minutes is enough to completely alter your health physiologically, you know, for the day. Mm-hmm. But also it builds up this buffer against inflammation, like future inflammation that's gonna, you know, try to impede on you, be it technology, toxins, whatever. You build up this buffer to where when that stuff comes in contact with you, you can actually detox it.
Right.
It's like you're charged up, essentially, which is so cool to think about.
And, you know, when I was a kid, we would run around barefoot, you know, all day. And, you know, they're obviously, you know, that's not the only factor. But if you think back of, you know, maybe your parents or your grandparents, you know, how they lived. And you know, my grandparents, they're now over 90, you know, they're still kicking. And I'm like, something was different back then than it is now. And I think you know, the grounding, there are so many, obviously so many factors, but if you just start, you know, ticking off one by one and try to go back to how things were, picking the best and ignoring maybe, you know, the lead paint and some of the other things that we did along the way. But you can make a significant impact in your health, and it doesn't really take much. I mean, take off your, you know, it's cheaper than wearing shoes, you know? Even if, you know, people might look funny at you, but and there are now even, I mean, again, if you, some of the things where you try to mitigate it with modern tools is expensive. Like I just bought a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes. That
I really want to try those. Those things look awesome.
Yeah.
Will they ground?
Yeah, they have now one that they have like a silver whatever or copper in the sole, and so you actually ground while wearing those shoes. I mean,
that's so cool.
Is it worth $230, you know, to do that? I don't know. It's cheaper to go barefoot, but if you have the budget, if you, you know, think, okay, I don't want to do barefoot, but I want to do the next best thing, you know, there are ways out there on how you can kind of buy your way out of, you know, doing certain things. And you know, it's, again, can be very inexpensive, or you can spend a lot of money on all of those things. The end result is probably very comparable.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're good on time. Let's go a few more minutes. Making sure I wasn't you know, taking too much of your time. I want to definitely highlight the fact that you have a supplement line, MKSupps. Briefly, tell us about it, because I'm a huge fan of those supplements in particular. So tell us what you have and you know, why you do it and health benefits.
Yeah. So we started out with a freeze-dried beef liver, simply because we figured, you know, I've been, as part of my blogging and reviewing, I've tried so many supplements, and, you know, there's this thing called supplement fatigue, where, you know, take something for a while and then you stop and maybe never come back. And I've tried so many things, but I figured, okay, what is the one thing that I think I would consume for the rest of my life? And those are organ meats. And, you know, there are, depending on if you raise your own animals, it's a little bit easier. But if you're just someone who, you know, needs to source them from a third party, you know, sourcing fresh organs cannot always be easy. You know, preparation, some people don't like, taste, texture, what have you. And I'm like, okay, freeze-dried, it's basically the real food, just freeze-dried, pulverized, and put into a gelatin capsule, you know. very convenient, and you get your one serving of organ meat daily by just popping 4 capsules. And so we decided to launch a freeze-dried beef organ supplements brand, and now we just released our first non-organ meat, a collagen and colostrum mix.
Awesome.
And yeah, the response has been incredible. I mean, a lot of people have realized by now that eating organs is probably a good thing. Best fresh, if you can. I like whenever I have access to it. Raw bison liver tastes good.
You eat it raw?
Uh-huh.
No way.
Yeah, it tastes. I don't like the taste of cooked liver, to be honest. I either eat it raw or in pate, or freeze dried.
That's awesome. And so where are you sourcing these organ meats from? Where do you get them?
New Zealand.
Okay.
But we're actually in talks with domestic suppliers. Up until a couple of years ago, New Zealand was the way to go because cattle can graze all year round. There is no winter where they have to eat hay. But now there are more and more domestic sources that do, grass-fed, grass-finished, do it well, regeneratively raised, the whole 9 yards. They still eat hay in winter, but as part of my, venturing into the whole homesteading and rotational grazing and all of those things, I realized that if the hay is well made, it's actually not much less nutritious than fresh grass.
Good. Okay.
I did not know that. But it's one thing that I've learned, and so I'm like, okay, a domestic source would make sense. So we might have, U.S. Beef organs in the future. We'll see.
Man, that's so cool, dude. I'm really glad you're doing that. I'm a big fan of organ meats. Are you familiar with Ben Greenfield?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I first heard about them on his podcast where he was talking about the benefits or whatever. Do you guys only do liver right now currently?
No, we have liver. We have an organ mix that contains 5 organs in the same ratio as the organ size in the animal. Because most other brands that I've seen out there are a lot of really good brands that source from the exact same ranges that we do. So ingredients are the same. But if you want to eat nose to tail, the liver is the biggest organ, the heart is the second biggest. So I figured it only makes sense to kind of have the same ratio in the capsules, right? We have a bone and marrow, for calcium and bone marrow. We have a heart and spleen specifically for exercise performance. That's like part of my warrior stack, if you will.
Dude, let's go. That's so cool, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, next we'll see. We're actually going to send out a survey here in the next couple of days to ask our customers what they want to have next. I'm playing with the thought of a freeze-dried oyster extract. So basically, the oyster flesh freeze-dried in capsules.
Yeah. For
those who like oysters.
So what's the benefit there? I'm not familiar with.
Oysters are, a lot of people say they increase libido, but they're also a great source of micronutrients. It's kind of the oyster is the liver of the sea, if you will.
Okay. Okay.
So for those who want to be more on the pescatarian side or whatever, that would be an option if people don't want to eat liver.
Yeah.
But there are a number of other, there are testicles that contain, beef testicles actually contain testosterone,
No way. Well, I guess that makes sense. But when you eat it, does your body
you get some of it. It's obviously not as effective as if you were to inject testosterone, but it also has none of the negative side effects of injecting testosterone. So that's one thing that a lot of people have asked for, just as a a lot of people think it's like a penis pill, but it's not. But it really can help support your the male organs in that area, and then the same goes with females. There is like freeze-dried ovaries and all of those things that support, because the idea is like supports like, so whatever nutrients the liver needs are found in liver. Well, if you're short on any of those micronutrients, then your liver might suffer. If you eat liver, you get those nutrients that your own liver might need. And the same goes with with uterus, with prostate, with testicles for that matter.
Well, that's an interesting point. Did your wife eat her placenta?
No, we didn't even know about that at the time.
Really?
But now, I would eat it.
Well, apparently, I did some research on. It's a legit thing.
Oh yeah.
So my ex Sadie, she encapsulated it and then took the pills afterwards, and she seemed to respond really well to it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, I would definitely. If I knew. If I had known back then what I know now, that's definitely something we would do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, we'll wrap it up there. I know you got to get going. Give me an hour of your time. This is so awesome. I really appreciate you just sharing this knowledge. It's super informational for me. I'm going to apply a lot of this to my life. So where can people find you on social media?
MKummer82 is typically my handle on X and Instagram. My biggest outlet, well, I've done a Primer Shift podcast where I do what you do here as well.
Right.
Speaking of, I should have you on the show.
Let's do it. That'd be awesome.
Schedule it after. But YouTube channel, and then michaelkummer.com is still my primary outlet as far as content is concerned. That's where I put out all of the written content, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's great, man. You're doing a phenomenal job. Really, really, really appreciate this. You guys out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Apply this to your life. If you have questions, hit me up or hit Michael up. We'd be more than happy to help you. This has been another episode of the Strain Forward podcast. And as always, guys, keep moving forward. All right, that's it.
All right.
That was awesome. Dude, that was really, really, really good. Gosh, man, I love it, dude. You're so well read. You know your stuff. Like, man,